This week I'm in Melbourne for the AGIC conference, which is the Australian Grains Industry Conference, probably the premier event for the grains industry each year, and it has about 800 delegates that turn up to discuss industry issues, from what's happening in research and development of new varieties, what's happening in terms of the trade, what's happening in terms of infrastructure, what's happening in terms of politics and the federal government, what's happening in terms of market. So it is really an important event. And from my point of view, as the MD of GRDC, it's a great opportunity to network, but also to hear some of the issues that might be rising, particularly in the marketplace, so that we can adjust our research program to deal with the issues our customers might have. So it is a really important time for us, and this time round it's particularly important because it gave us an opportunity to make a really important announcement, which is our bilateral agreement that we've just signed with the Victorian government, which will lock in $60 million for R&D, largely to be occurring in Horsham, and very much focused on developing the next generation of pulse crops, making sure they've got the quality for our markets, also looking at building the agronomy for our high rainfall systems, and also looking at pathology, making sure we've got the diseases that emerge under control, and looking after our genetic resources, the Australian Gene Bank at Horsham. This bilateral that we've just signed with Victoria is about making sure that we've got the pulse research occurring, not just for Victoria, but the pulse research occurring at Horsham, which is going to serve the whole of the Australian grains industry. The other activity that GRDC has been very involved with over the last few months has been actually getting the next layer of investment on the ground. So this financial year we're looking at investing $190 million in R&D, and it's critical that every one of those projects that we're investing in is really well thought out, has clear objectives, got clear outcomes, it's got clear deliverables that will actually improve the profitability of farmers. And there's a lot of work in that, and it really starts on the ground with making sure that we understand the issues. So I'm sure you're aware we've got our regional panels, and they play a very important role in actually identifying the issue in the first place. But we also have our regional cropping solution groups. So for example, in West Australia, there's 80 people, 80 well-respected growers, advisors out there who are interacting with our panels and making sure that we've actually defined the issue, and that what we're going to invest in terms of the research is actually going to give them the answers, or likely to give them the answers they need to improve profitability on their farm. For example, we're working on quality aspects of wheat for the noodle market to make sure that we're actually meeting their needs. We're working on herbicide resistance and making sure that we've got strategies that work on the farm so that growers can keep growing crops as herbicide resistance and ryegrass and other species emerges. A big challenge for Australian growers. We've got programs in place to make sure that if there are new diseases, we can detect them early. And we've got the skills and the expertise and the links internationally to make sure that we can put in place quickly practices that growers can use to manage those diseases and those outbreaks on their farm. But in particular, one of the ones that we are focused on, and I think is really important, is just speeding up the breeding cycle, making sure that we get maximum genetic gain every single year out of our key breeding programs. Some of the technologies, for example, we've been able to access from overseas, like the seed chipper, which allows us to take a tiny little chip of a wheat seed and analyse it and find out what its DNA says, and then select the seeds which have got the traits we want before we've even planted a single seed. That sort of technology. The managed environment facilities, where we can actually go out into the paddock in a number of places around Australia and look at water use efficiency and make sure we are actually selecting those individual plants which have got the best water use efficiency. That's what's the sort of exciting things that are in the portfolio, which will deliver the next generation of improvements to Australian grain growers. Finally, looking to the future, I think one of the questions I get asked a lot in my role as MD of GRDC is, what's the next silver bullet? And frankly, the reality is it's getting harder and harder to find silver bullets. We've got all the low-hanging fruit, and in a lot of cases it's about getting the system to work better. But when I look overseas, when I look globally, there are some opportunities, and I think if you're looking crystal balling and looking at what are the new frontiers, what are the new technologies that might make a big impact on Australian agriculture, and particularly in the grain sector, I think there is some areas in automation and in remote sensing and drones. There's some areas in there, agriculture and engineering, where I think there are some opportunities, there are some new technologies that are developing in other sectors and other parts of, completely other sectors of the economy, that we should be looking at from a grains perspective and saying, well, what does this mean for us in grains, and how can we actually capture that technology, harness it to actually improve our performance going forward, so again we can improve our profitability. So if you want to know more about GRDC or the activities or investments that we're making at GRDC, please just go to our webpage, look at our Facebook account, follow us on Twitter, you'll find out a whole lot more.